This is AM Agenda. With me now, Labor frontbencher Nick Champion and Liberal frontbencher Paul Fletcher. Nick, Champion, first to you on Scott Morrison's comments re the pension. Should Labor be, reconsidering this, particularly when the vast bulk of pensioners are untouched here? Some are actually better off. It's really only at the higher end in terms of assets where people will start to lose their part pension.
Well, we'll have a look at the detail once it's in the budget, not something that's dropped to the Daily Telegraph. We'll want to see these things in detail. You wouldn't trust this government. They told us before the election that they wouldn't touch pensions, that there were going to be no changes to pensions. In Tony Abbott's famous interview to SBS, we know that immediately after the election they sought to change the indexation rate. They've spent the last year or so telling us that that wasn't unfair. They now dropped that and adopted a new proposal. I think it's incumbent on Labor to have a careful look at that proposal and make sure it's fair.
Now, I won't ask you, Paul Fletcher, about that issue because we've heard from Scott Morrison at length from your side of politics. I want to ask you about this other issue about Medicines Australia apparently not happy with the government's plans to make some $5 billion in savings through the PBS. Is this picking a war with another big medical industry here?
Well, Kieran, the pharmaceutical benefits scheme involves over $9 billion of taxpayer expenditure each year. What Health Minister Susan Lee is working to do is to get better value for taxpayers, also better value for consumers, so people who are purchasing drugs, seeking to introduce some competition into the system, and it's very important to recognise that there's a large number of new drugs that are seeking to go onto the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. In fact, there's some $3 billion worth of new drugs that are seeking approval to go onto that scheme. So it's important that we get the maximum efficiencies and savings that we can to be able to fund the provision of new drugs. Medicine's advancing all the time, which is good news, but we need to make sure that the system is run in an affordable way. So this is about value for taxpayers, value for consumers.
Nick Champion, that seems to make a lot of sense given the ballooning cost of that, and as Paul Fletcher rightly says, the ever increasing number of drugs that should be and need to be listed on the PBS.
Well, it's a challenge for every government. We'll have a careful look at the detail of these proposals. I think the critical thing is if we do make efficiency gains in health, that they're reinvested in health, in other areas of health. That's what Labor tried to do when we were in government, and we made a number of savings which were then reinvested in the health portfolio. So that's a critical thing, and I guess this is a better approach than just simply hacking into people when they go to the GP, for instance, which is what the government's first attempt at health policy making was.
Now, Paul Fletcher, on this story in the Australian, Nikki Savva's story, and then further to that two cabinet ministers have told Sky News that if this budget is a failure, that Joe Hockey will have to go. Your reaction to all of that?
Well, Kieran, Joe Hockey's doing a terrific job, and he and the government are focused on bringing down the government's second budget to meet the needs of the Australian people. So it's about a continued incremental path back towards surplus over time. It's about responsible measures in relation to, for example, as we've just talked about, the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. And against that, unfortunately, we've got a Labor Party which is completely irresponsible, which is failing to back $5 billion worth of savings measures, which the Labor Party took to the last election. So they told the Australian people at the last election $5 billion worth of savings measures that we, Labor, would legislate if we came to power. They included those in their budget numbers. They then walked away from that last year. So there's one major party here which is pursuing responsible policies for the Australian people, bringing down a budget that will be responsible, measured and fair, and there's one unfortunately political party which is not stepping up to the responsibility that goes with being a major political party.
Nick Champion, the Greens leader, the new Greens leader, Richard Di Natale, already the Greens were eating away at the left flank of the Labor vote. Now this gentleman, GP, seen as more middle ground, is he a real threat to the Labor vote here?
Well, I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, it seemed to me to be a pretty startling announcement. First of all, the resignation of the existing leader, and then to have a ballot an hour later, it would seem to me to be a bit of a stitch-up in the Greens, and there are a number of unhappy campers to which you alluded to. I don't think political parties can behave that way if they want to have any legitimacy in the community. So, you know, we'll wait and see what the Greens come out with, but let's not forget that if you're a progressive Australian who wanted an emissions trading scheme, the Greens voted against it. That was their record. And on things like petrol taxes, they say one thing and do another.
Any chance of a more constructive approach here, Paul Fletcher in the Senate? You optimistic, just quickly?
Well, for a minor party leader to have impact, they need to engage with the government. We certainly encourage the Greens to do that. We hope we'll see that from new leader Richard Di Natale. We'll obviously engage with him in a constructive way. We're always ready to speak to the minor parties and everybody across the Senate. That's part of being a responsible government and taking forward measures that are in the interest of Australia. So there's goodwill on our side, and let's hope that we see the rhetoric match with performance from the Greens.
Gentlemen, thanks so much. Paul Fletcher and Nick Champion, have a good day. A quick break on AM Agenda, back in just a moment.